Hello, everyone. It is Pal Ponder on Weather coming to you with my top 10 list of the coldest, snowiest winters in the United States. Before we get started, if you like weather-related content, please consider subscribing to my channel. So let's get right to it. So I know number 10 would be when Niagara Falls froze over in the winter of 1911-1912. Back then, in 1912, United States, there was a cold wave that was one of the coldest periods since 1870 in the northern United States. That cold wave essentially started in 1911 and finally ended in 1912. And that cold wave began in 1911. It was the Great Blue Northern dropped temperatures abruptly. It was the coldest November on record in the continental United States, with the average temperature of 37 degrees, while December was actually relatively mild. In January of that year, it was the seventh coldest January on record for the continental United States, and states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota were their coldest Januaries on record. Even South Dakota dropped to like 38 below zero. And in March of 1912 was the second coldest March on record, in which they had widespread snowfalls in Nebraska, North Dakota, and it was its coldest on record since 1985 through all the way through 2017. And that was the year you can look at the Niagara Falls in 1911. It froze over. Number 9 is when the Ohio River froze over in the winter of 1917 and 1918. And this was also a deep solar minimum year where they had 318 days of no sunspots, like we have a low solar minimum this year. Back in that year, the winter was very frigid across the east, and it created a heat fuel crisis equal only to that of 1977. Severe cold wave in 1917 and through December of 17 and January of 18 in the Northeast, where basically New York City dropped to 13 below zero and Boston dropped to 15 below zero with radiational cooling. West Virginia dropped to 37 below, and parts of White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, dropped to 25 below. And there are even parts of Michigan dropped to 48 below. And you can see the Ohio River actually, this is a picture of Augusta, Kentucky, actually froze over. People were actually walking on it on January 8th of 1918. That's pretty cool. Number 8 was the Buffalo blizzard. They had over 7 feet of snow in the winter of 76, 77. That blizzard of 77 hit western New York and southern Ontario from essentially January 28 to February 1st. The wind gusts peaked from 46 to 69 miles an hour, and parts of the area of Buffalo had almost 100 inches of snow. That was incredible. Their drifts were 30 to 40 feet. There were 23 storm-related deaths in western New York, and it remains one of the great blizzards of all time, dating back all the way at 120 years. And here's kind of a picture of what that looked like back in 1977. Number 7 was the coldest U.S. winter in 25 years, the winter of 2009 and 2010, which was another solar minimum year like we have this year in 2009. You can see the coldest winter in 25 years had pretty much the entire United States with well below normal temperatures. There's pockets in the South that had their record coldest. The Midwest had much below temperatures. The only place that was the warmest was in Maine. But 2/3 of the country were well below normal that year, where they had a ton of snow in Texas. They even had cold all the way down to Florida. Even the tornado outbreaks in the Midwest because of the clash in temperatures. They had some floods and ice, but a ton of snow dumped the majority of the country, pretty much 2/3 of the country that year. Number 6 was 295 consecutive hours below freezing in Dallas in the winter of 1983 and 1984. That particular winter, there was a severe Arctic outbreak on December 18th, where the temperatures plunged in Dallas, it still is all-time record by far for 295 consecutive hours where the temperature dropped below freezing. The coldest temperature was 5 degrees back on December 12th of 1983. And there was still parts of Glenrose where it dropped down to -2. And that year in DFW was one of the few years that actually dropped below zero of 1 degrees. And here's a picture of a snowman. I think this was in Nebraska. Here's up north too. But that year was an incredible Arctic outbreak, and it went all the way to the deep south. And still to this day, there's nothing that even touches it that comes close for the DFW area. Number 5 is the Great Blizzard of the winter of 1978-79. That year was historic storm across the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes. So back in January 25th through the 27th in 1978, it was a blizzard cited as having the worst blizzard in United States history. The third lowest non-tropical atmospheric pressure ever recorded in the mainland history of the United States in Mount Clemens, Michigan, was 956 millibars. That's pretty incredible. That's pretty much equivalent to a major hurricane. That low of a pressure back on January 26th of 78. And here's the pictures. The people are just buried and driving down the freeway, and you see those houses with the snow drifts are just pretty much up to their roof. They've got no place to put the snow. Number 4 was the Great Arctic Outbreak in the winter of 1985. That year, it was the most intense Arctic outbreak of the 20th century. It occurred basically January 18th or the 22nd of 1985. Extremely cold temperatures affected every state of the Rockies, with 3 states that have record low temperatures where it dropped to 34 below in North Carolina, 19 below in South Carolina, and 30 below in Virginia. And it even dropped to 10 degrees below zero in Washington, D.C., if you can believe that. And some of these low temperatures are incredible. In Dallas, it dropped to 8, but much of the Wisconsins and Minnesota dropped to well below 30 to 40 to below zero in that outbreak. And it's one of the coldest outbreaks in U.S. history, one of them. Number 3 is the Great Blizzard in the winter of 78. That year, in 1978, what some called the worst blizzard in the United States history slammed the tri-state area and the Midwest on the night of January 25th. And January 78 ended the 31 inches of snow for that year. And, at 77, 78 finished with 53 inches of snow. Here's a picture of this guy's house. It pretty much all the way up to his roof. He's got no place to put it. And people are just literally buried in snow that year. There's many stories coming from that year. Number all-time 2 is when they had 20 inches of snow in Houston, Texas, if you can believe that, in the winter of 1895 on Valentine's Day. There was a huge Arctic outbreak, and it was actually the first recorded time frame that they started recording data in Houston. It was the mother of all snows came to Valentine's Day, and Houston hit 20 inches of snow between February 14th and 15th. The snow didn't just fall in Houston. It was a massive snowstorm that hit all the way to Tampico, Mexico, to Pensacola. There were numerous. You can see all the places in the southeast that got records amounts of snow in that outbreak. So 20 inches of snow in Houston is by far the all-time snowiest recorded history record. Even more snow than ever, still to this day, even more snow than Chicago, Illinois' record. The second for that city is 4.4 inches. So they have a long ways to go to beat that record. And number 1 of all time, the all-time great outbreak of the winter of 1898 and 1899 was historic. Some of these records are still, to this day, are still need to be broken, where this was essentially, almost 102 years ago, where the first couple of weeks in Los Angeles, it dropped almost to freezing, 33 degrees in Los Angeles, and it dropped to 9 degrees in Portland, Oregon. Boise, Idaho was 9 below. There was many parts of the country that dropped to 30, 40, 50 below zero in parts of the Midwest. And even Washington, D.C. was 20 degrees below zero. And still to this day, Florida and Tallahassee, all-time record, -2 degrees. That is the state record. I'm back on February 13th in Florida, -2 degrees, if you can believe that. And there were over 100 people that got killed in this Arctic outbreak. It was incredible. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my top 10 coldest, snowiest winters of all time. If you like weather-related content, please consider subscribing to my channel and catch me at the next video when I protect you before and after the storm.